With troop commitments in Eastern Europe to fresh worries about North America's own defenses, is it time for Canada to rearm? This is the Great White North Report. The Canadian government has decided to recall 3,500 fresh military personnel as part of NATO's Eastern European Force, which is based in Poland, I believe, right now, not in Ukraine. So far NATO's keeping an eye on, but staying out of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict or war. I think Putin made a big mistake in invading Ukraine. This is not 2014 and Crimea all over again. A lot has happened since then. Putin was hoping for another Crimea where he could just walk in and not face any major repercussions. So Putin was hoping that a vast show of military force would get him the two regions that he wants most in Ukraine, as well as to get Ukraine to demilitarize and bow out of any potential alliances with Western powers, which is something Russia does not really want. Russia sees Ukraine as more of in its sphere of influence, and because it shares a large border with Ukraine, it does not want to see a possible hostile force on its border, which caused Putin to launch a war. I think he was hoping for a Israeli-type 6-day war, in which he has that much time before Western pressure begins to take its toll. But the Ukrainians have strongly resisted, which is good, and it's bogged down. So there's not a lot Russia can do right now but fight a long, drawn-out war, which reveals its own weaknesses and will damage it, as we've sanctioned the hell out of their leadership. We're sending aid to the Ukrainians in the form of lethal and non-lethal, and we're kicking them out of our banking system. We're starting to sanction their oil, so not buying their oil, which will lead to their economy collapsing. Kick them out of our airspace. And also, even in the world of sports, we're slowly banning Russia from all sorts of things. So Trudeau is currently in Europe right now to talk to his allies, and he says that NATO needs to avoid an all-out war with Russia. Well, mainly because Canada's not ready for such a thing. No one wants war, not at that scale. And Putin is definitely threatening it. And Putin's just crazy enough to do it. But let's face it, Trudeau does not want a war simply because we don't have the capability to fight a war. That's why we sanction them economically, because that's all we have. We've sent rocket launchers, hand grenades, sniper rifles, carbines. We've sent a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole list of it to Ukraine to help them out. But we've yet to send any real hard physical aid in the form of troops, tanks, or airplanes. Quite simply, we don't have tanks and airplanes to send them. And if we did, the Ukrainians don't really have experience with the CF-18s, and the CF-18s would not really be that great anyway. Now, we do have Canadian forces stationed in Latvia as part of Operation Reassurance, which is placed as a deterrent. And we also have about 500 special ops troops in Ukraine helping to train the Ukrainian army. And I haven't heard anything what they're doing since then. But let's face it, we don't exactly spend a lot on our defense budget. We spend about 1.39% of our GDP on defense, and Trudeau has long been trying to increase that to a defense budget to $32 billion over several years. Harper planned to commit that in 2014 after Russia's annexation of Crimea, but when Harper got defeated by the Liberals, that plan was scrapped, and we've come nowhere close to that. All you have to do is go to globalfirepower.com. We currently spend just over $23.5 billion on our defense, which is $20 billion less than Australia does. We're sitting in 14th spot for that, which may seem pretty big, but when you look at the countries below us, around us, not really. And considering how much geography we have to deal with, almost 10 million square kilometers of land, 200,000 kilometers of coastline to defend, that's not exactly good. And our military is becoming obsolete. We're using fighter planes that are 4 decades old. For example, we have no dedicated air defense to keep soldiers on the ground safe from attack helicopters and fighter bombers. And we rely on our allies for that kind of protection. The CF-18s that we currently use are no match for Russia's modern air defense system. So they can't even fly near the Russian border without getting shot down. And even our Royal Canadian Navy, even though we've modernized our frigates, is hamstrung because we have no dedicated replenishment ship that can enter a combat zone. The current one we have is unarmed. And currently we're going through a cancel culture within our military, which definitely doesn't help our the culture, the military culture, and morale. So we've seen a decline in readiness. This article says that only 65.4% of our Army equipment and vehicles were considered serviceable, as well as 60.8% of a fleet of our Air Force. And you just have to go to global firepower to see that. We have currently 63 fighter interceptors to cover that much airspace. Most of them are based in Cold Lake, Alberta, and Bagotville, I think that's in Quebec. We have no dedicated attack fighters or bombers. Of our helicopters, we have 0 attack helicopters. So we have nothing in the jar. Our fighters are 40 years old, though we did buy some recent ones from Australia, but those are mostly trainers and spare parts. Interestingly enough, Harper was going to buy the F-35. He was deeply involved in the development process. The Conservatives were for the F-35 from the States, and Trudeau got elected on one of his promises was he was going to pull out of that, and he did. And guess what? Now we're back to in a bidding for that same fighter that we discarded when the Liberals came in power. The F-35, or we're going to buy the Swedish Saab Gripen fighter. Now, I don't know about you, but the last time Sweden fought a war, Napoleon was a thing. So I'd rather go with the American variants just because they have combat experience in their designs as opposed to the Swedes, who haven't really fought a war in a long, long time. And our land force, we have 82 tanks to cover 10 million square kilometers of land. 1,500 armored vehicles, most of those would be the light armored vehicles, so LAV 4s. No self-propelled artillery, we have only so much towed artillery, we have no rocket projectors, so we have nothing. And this is why the Americans see us as a dead weight. NORAD definitely needs upgrading, and let's face it, Canada has relied heavily on American protection, even in the Cold War, to defend our borders. And I think it's time. Now, the Liberals have pledged $163 million to upgrade NORAD in 2021, but have done little else. Again, we don't have the necessary fighter interceptors to patrol our northern borders. Our Navy is now considered a coastal power, not a global power, as we only have 12 frigates and 4 submarines, as well as 12 patrol vessels. Our Arctic patrol vessels are not really for deep ice, the new ones we built. And our frigates were modernized, but we only send them out one at a time. And the submarines have been plagued with problems, constantly plagued with problems. So we definitely need new submarines, new frigates. We are building new frigates, but we're building the Arctic patrol vessels first, which means we only have one working shipyard on military vessels. The other shipyard is building the auxiliary vessels in BC. Quebec is supposed to be opening up a third shipyard to help build the frigates, but really we could use a 4th and 5th one and start building other stuff as well. So with Putin's decision to invade Ukraine and also threaten with nuclear war, should be a wake-up call to Canada to start the process of rearming. Should be, but will it? In our woke universe that is Canada, you would think that a ray of light would shine through someone's head. Because let's face it, the Russians and Chinese are becoming increasingly belligerent all over the world and are acting like assholes. And the biggest uncertainty we face is prioritization. What's more important, our Air Force or our Navy or our land forces? Well, had we not pissed around and did nothing but modernize stuff, we would have been fine. So I think the Ukraine war should be a kick in the ass, a wake-up call for Canada to smarten up and to start really focusing on our national defense and stop riding on the U.S. coattails a little more. Any Canadians out there, let me know what you guys think. Should Canada rearm, or should we just maintain the status quo and stumble along as we are now? Leave comments in the comment section, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel. Until next time, this has been the Great White North Report.